What's up, guys? This is your host, Gavin J Gallagher, and you are listening to episode 14 of Behind the Facade, where I explore the mental and emotional game that plays out subconsciously in your mind and the minds of everyone else in the real estate and property market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to get control of your thought process, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. So I have caught up with the podcasts being uploaded, and it's Sunday the 2nd of August, and this episode will air tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. So let me see. Last week's episode 13 was a Q&A session, and I got into a number of different questions on foreign property, and if you guys would like to leave further questions for me to answer, I'd be only delighted to answer them. So the reason I wanted to catch up on the podcasts is because I have an announcement today, and it's yesterday was the 1st of August. So this is an August announcement, and what I've actually done is I've kicked it off with a very tough physical challenge or a stretch goal. And what I've announced online yesterday on my Facebook was that during the month of August, I am going to attempt to complete a total of 10,000 burpees. In other words, an average of 325 burpees per day, every single day for 31 consecutive days. So what's tough about that is the need for total consistency. I cannot miss a single day. If I miss a day, then I have to double the extra amount the following day. So 650 burpees is not an easy task, so I don't want to miss a single day. And so you can see how it would quickly get out of hand if I did miss a day. So consistency is the key with this particular challenge. So why am I telling you this? Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a charity fundraiser, and I'd be grateful for anybody who would like to support it. It's for a very good cause. The charity, it's actually called Charity Water, and it's a cause that I've been supporting for a couple of years. I contribute a certain amount every month to them, and I just think it's a worthy cause. And during coronavirus and all that kind of stuff, it's very easy to forget that there are charities out there trying to do their work, and a lot of the funding has dried up and stuff. So I just thought it was a worthwhile thing to kind of highlight. You'll find details of my challenge on my GoFundMe page or my Facebook profile. You just have to look up Gavin's 10,000 burpee August challenge, and it should be one of the search results that comes up first. And if you want to donate, I'd be very grateful for that. Second reason I wanted to mention this is because I do think it's a very good exercise in mental discipline to set yourself sort of regular stretch goals. And by that I mean really, really challenging targets for a period of time, whether it's an hour or a week or a month or a year. I mean, a year is hard to kind of keep going, but you can set yourself, say, a quarterly target or a monthly target. And by doing this and making it very, very difficult, you have to get super determined, super focused and tenacious. And you got to give yourself a target number that seems almost unobtainable. And by that I mean, you know, when I set last December, I decided that not last December. I did the challenge last December, but last October, I decided I wanted to do 1,000 burpees in a single go. And I went ahead and I trained for 2 or 3 months. And at the end of December, the 30th of December, the day before New Year's Eve, I did 1,000 burpees. And I did that for a charity as well. And the idea of that was that 1,000 burpees actually sounded unobtainable to me when I began the challenge. But then you build up the resistance and all of that. And so it's a good mental exercise. So think of, and it doesn't have to be just fitness. This could be, you could do it related to diet. You could do it related to your business, related to income, related to the number of books that you read, anything at all that you feel like challenging yourself where you could benefit from it. And so I usually go and think of what my max is today, and then I say, okay, I'm going to try and do 2 or 3x that, and you give yourself, say, a month to pull it off. And you can apply it, as I said, you can apply it to pretty much anything. Just last week, I set myself a challenge, and I did a 36-hour fast. And so at 7 p.m. on Wednesday last week, I stopped eating, and I went through the entire of Thursday without eating a single thing. And then through the night, and then on Friday morning at 7 a.m., it was 36 hours that I hadn't eaten. And I actually did a workout and a run that morning as well, just to kind of double up the difficulty level. And it's just mental exercise. I like to set these things because I believe your sort of mental strength is a muscle that you actually have to train, and you have to work on it. And if you're going to do this stuff every day, you're going to be far stronger down the road than you would be. And if the kind of discipline and patience and resilience and restraint that I talk about in this business that's necessary, it doesn't just come along. You do have to kind of work on it. And these are just ways to build mental strength. And when you have mental strength, then you can find it an awful lot easier. And also the resilience will be very good for you in the event that you go into a negative cycle and you're facing some very big challenges. And I found that in 2008, 2009, back in that time when the whole market collapsed, I mean, I was under enormous stress. I owed a lot of money to a lot of different banks, and they were coming after me, and the stress was enormous. And what I found was that by getting into exercise and just deciding to kind of make the focus of the day exercise, it allowed me to kind of get that strength I needed just to kind of pull through. And so anyway, that's my 10,000 burpee August challenge. And again, you'll find that over on the GoFundMe page or my Facebook profile. And if you want to follow me on my daily progress with the actual challenge, you can find me on Strava and Freeletics. Those are apps that I use on the iPhone, and you'll find me using the handle Gavin J Gallagher. Speaking of being consistent, I wanted to give a very quick shout out to Ollie, who is a listener and sent me a very nice message on LinkedIn. He mentioned various things, but what he did suggest was that I maintain my weekly consistency, and that other podcasts that he listened to, sometimes they drop off here and there, and they don't give you a reason as to why they dropped off. And he says it's not a great thing to do. So for you guys, my listeners, my audience, I wanted to give you this commitment that every Monday, 6 a.m. Irish time, that is the day that this thing, it goes out, come hell or high water. Tomorrow is a bank holiday here in Ireland, so that's no excuse. The podcast is going out tomorrow at 6 a.m. And also bear in mind that my wife Ilga is 38 weeks pregnant and could go into labor at any moment. And so at this stage, I'm still prepared to make that commitment, and also the commitment to do 325 burpees a day minimum for the next 31 days, regardless of whether the baby is born or not. So that's the kind of standards that I kind of set for myself, just because the tougher they are, the more mental resilience and the mental strength that you have. So that's just a little thing for me. Today's episode, I'm testing out a new format insofar as I'm now going to play you a interview with a friend of mine, Mr. Jerry Tate of Tate Harmer Architects in London. Now, Jerry's firm specialises in sustainable design and low energy housing. And to those of you who enjoy the TV show Grand Designs, Jerry has the honour of not only appearing on it as one of the architects of one of the houses that featured, but it's also the show that featured the house that he built was actually the most watched episode of all time in Grand Designs in the show's history. And as Jerry will explain during this interview, it was both a bittersweet experience for him because of what happened during it. And I won't spoil the surprise. Jerry went and spent a couple of years in working for a guy called Nick Grimshaw of Grimshaw Architects. And Nick Grimshaw is one of the biggest architects in the world. He's got one of those practices that has offices all over the planet, and he's got hundreds and hundreds of partners and things like that. So huge firm, and Nick Grimshaw won the gold medal and things like that. So Jerry worked for Nick for a couple of years, and I do get into asking Jerry what were some of the sort of the great behaviors and mindset tricks and stuff that he noticed that Nick Grimshaw had that allowed him to build such a massive firm and such great success around the world. So that's worth getting into. Also, one of the projects that Jerry worked on while he was in Grimshaw's was a place called the Eden Project, and that's in the UK, and it's a very, very special place. And what I'm going to do is I'll actually put a link in the comments below and on the show notes, just so that you can go and check that out, because it is pretty incredible. So I'm sure you're going to find this episode packed full of tips and strategies. And so without further ado, please welcome Mr. Jerry Tate. All right, guys, we've got an interview today with Mr. Jerry Tate, who is an architect based in London. He has his own firm called Tate Harmer. And welcome, Jerry. I hope you're
hello. Hi.
I hope you're having a good day in London.
Yeah.
I thought we'd kick off this morning's talk with a little backstory for the audience. Can you tell me about your upbringing and the journey to becoming an architect to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So, well, right back, I was always the guy at school who could draw stuff. Do you know what I mean? So I was that guy. And what happens is, I think at school, when you can draw stuff, but you also pass all your exams, they sort of tell you you can't just be an artist. You've got to be something else other than that. So that's sort of steered me into architecture, I have to say, really at first. And I had a lovely upbringing in Suffolk. A really great time playing in the woods and sort of the valleys, and slightly Winnie the Pooh kind of upbringing, but actually also weirdly quite lonely, interestingly. So there wasn't a lot of people about, basically. I mean, that's Suffolk for you. It's countryside, it's middle of nowhere. So one of the things that I think I've always been trying to do then, because I moved then to London pretty quickly, because I thought, well, that's where the people are. I'm going to go to London. And then you go to London, there's lots of people and you're not lonely anymore. It's fantastic, but there's no nature. Actually there is some nature in London. There's lots of trees and there's lots of parks, and I'm very grateful for that. But the truth is, you do quite a lot of the time feel a bit disconnected from this sort of natural environment that you were in as a kid. So I suspect that most of my career is trying to square that circle, really, about how do you create an environment that feels like you're connected to nature, but also allows you to have this kind of social interaction all the time to stop you feeling, a bit bored. And I think that's sort of where I came from. I studied at Nottingham and UCL Bartlett and then Harvard, basically. So I did kind of like lots of different places to study at, which is, by the way, something I recommend everyone does, especially studying abroad. It's brilliant studying abroad because it makes you realize that a lot of stuff you've assumed is actually just your context, if that makes sense. So it's not actual real, there's wherever you are, there's a context in which you're in, and that's how you see the world. And so the East Coast of America actually sees the world remarkably differently, interestingly, from Europe. And then I worked for Grimshaw, basically. So I worked for a company called Grimshaw Architects, for Nick Grimshaw, who's a fantastic architect. He's won the gold medal last year, but he's very eminent. He was the president of the Royal Academy and stuff like that. But Nick's a really good role model because he is a really, really decent chap. Like, he's always polite and he's always nice and he's very generous and he makes sure people are okay and all those kind of things. And one of the jobs that I worked with at Grimshaw was the Eden project. So I was the project architect for part of it, for mainly for the education building, but also for sort of wider master plan bits and finishing the biomes off and stuff like that.
Can you just, for the purpose of, some of the audience will not have heard of the Eden project before. Can you just give us a little overview of what that is? I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, but just for somebody who's never heard of it, can you give us an overview?
No, absolutely. No, so the Eden project it's essentially a large series of greenhouses and gardens based in a quarry in Cornwall. And they're very, very large greenhouses. So they're sort of big ETFE domes. The biggest one is the size of Trafalgar Square, and you could fit Nelson's Column in it. So it is sort of very, very large. And Eden was founded by Tim Smith and Jonathan Ball, and their mission was to make people understand how amazing plants are, and how reliant we are on them. So they are about sustainability, but that's not actually their main focus. Their main focus is on plants. So the point about Eden is that they wanted to have proper ecosystems which demonstrate how plants work. So the biome that is the size, so the domes are called biomes, and the biome that is the size of Trafalgar Square is the largest working rainforest in captivity, if you like. So there are rainforests you can go to which are kind of like examples of trees, but Their one is a proper running ecosystem with things like bullfrogs in it and the right kind of birds and everything. It's a wonderful, really, really, overwhelming place actually when you walk around it. When you're inside the middle of it, it feels like you are in the middle of a rainforest in Malaysia or somewhere like that. Yeah. And the point about kind of an immersive environment like that is it's Eden was also started by some quite clever educationalists actually, and it's an immersive educational tool. So if I said to you why the rainforest is really important, so if I explained to you that something like 70 to 80% of all our species are in the rainforest, or the fact that it cools the earth down by about 4 or 5 degrees, or all of those things, that's all data. And you might think, well, that's great, but it wouldn't actually change your mind. It wouldn't make you persuade you in a way that would change your behavior. So Eden thing is about changing behavior. So the reason that they've got like a rainforest, instead of explaining to you how amazing a rainforest is by the time you've walked around the rainforest, it would take you about an hour, and you'd come out, and then you would understand how amazing rainforests are. You just kind of intuitively get it because you've been immersed in that environment. And then they've got you, right? And then they can tell you, well, this is what you need to do to make sure the rainforest doesn't go, and so that's sort of a really good education tool. Like, I think it's every 10 minutes, a part of the rainforest the size of the one at Eden that you've just walked around disappears permanently. It's gone.
Yeah, in Brazil and places. Yeah, in
Brazil, yeah, because there's an awful lot of deforestation that's going on there. In the same way as actually we deforested the UK, we did it about 1,200 years ago. So
yeah, and Ireland too. Yeah,
yeah. So, but I mean, so that's basically that's what they're doing, and it's a lovely place. It's really amazing, and it's a sort of immersive education environment full of people who are passionate about plants and biology, and they are also about sustainability, but as a kind of product of that, if you like. One of the things that I really like about, I've gone off on a tangent, I'm sorry about this, but one of the things
back now in a second.
One of the things I really like about their angle on sustainability is it is a positive message, and this is one of my really big things about sustainability is it's too easy to be negative and to wag fingers and to say, if you don't do something, the world's going to end and you're going to have a horrible time. So, you have to have a slightly worse time of it and then you'll be okay. And actually, it's a much more positive message to say, if you lived in tune with nature, you might have better food. You might have better clothes. You might have a better life. You might have better health. You might find that you'll feel more connected to nature. There's all these sort of benefits that you could demonstrate, which show that actually making a choice to be sustainable isn't something which is going to make your life worse. It's going to make your life better.
So to positively reinforce it, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of positive messaging. And Eden, that's what Eden puts forward as a message. And that's something that Tim's always talking about is, this is going to be better. You're going to have better life, better sex, better food, better everything. And I think that's a much more positive message. And it also changes the way then you approach sustainability. Because if it's not just about using less, it's about being more in tune, creating a circular economy, communicating with each other more. There's kind of social message in there as well. So it's a sort of much broader message than just, using less energy, say, which is important, but only part of the overall equation, really.
I get you. Tell me this. So working for Grimshaw, it's a large global practice. How important would you say it is for people starting out in their career to go and work for some sort of a large practice like that if they have ambitions to start their own?
So, the reason, I wanted to work at Grimshaw because primarily because I like their work, actually, I have to say. But I think I'm a great believer in if you like something, if you like what someone does, you've got to work for them to understand how they do it, if that makes sense. So I really like the work that Grimshaw did, and I really admired the practice that Nick had built. So I wanted to work there to find out how he'd done it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then actually I stayed there for about 7-8 years, and I built a building from start to finish, which is the education building down at Eden. And when I'd done that, I felt like I had learned what I needed to learn at Nick's practice.
And tell me, was there any standout habits or behaviors that Nick Grimshaw, demonstrated to you that you realized that's a kind of one of the superpowers that'll help, anybody build a business or?
Well, the most important thing I think that Nick was clear about was that although the company was called Grimshaw Architects, and it had to be because that's just the way the world works, somebody expected somebody to be on top of it and running it. It was a community, and it was a communal effort, and architecture is a team game, essentially. So I think that there's a lot of sort of misinformation about a genius architect sitting there doing fabulous sketches with a thick pen, and then other people make it happen, kind of thing. Yeah, and it's just not true. And especially not as someone like Grimshaw. Grimshaw buildings come a bit from the big pen stuff, but they also come from really careful analysis of the site and the brief and an understanding of the technology you're going to make the building from, and an understanding of sustainability. They're very clear that buildings are a product of all these overlapping opportunities, restrictions, creative thoughts. And that doesn't all just come from somebody sat there with a big pen. It comes from the team game of everyone getting all of this together to see what then comes out of this process. And Nick was always very clear that, from a very early stage, he had proper partners. Actually, the most fantastic thing Nick did was when he wanted to step back, he put all of his shares into an employee trust and gave it to the company and just said, right, you guys, just you go,
Wow.
I'm gonna remain helping you out, but I want you to run yourselves, kind of thing. So he's always very clear that it wasn't all about him, and it was a team game, architecture. And I think that's just so important, because people get wrapped up into this kind of egotistical mindset of there's a genius in the top and everyone else is doing their bidding. And it's
a team game. Yeah.
It's completely untrue. It's just not how, especially not in modern day buildings where it's a fantastically complex operation to make a building now. And it's impossible for me to understand exactly how a heat pump works. I've got a vague notion, for example, but a heat pump or an AC unit or an air handling unit, or exactly how a triple glazed window works in terms of every single component and how it all goes together. I know broadly, but I won't know exactly it. So really, a lot of architecture is about coordinating and getting your team to all function, both inside your company and outside as well. Yeah. So there you go. That's a big thing from Grimshaw.
That's great. I mean, it's certainly you talk about ego there, and that's something that I've kind of reinforced multiple times on this podcast. I've talked about the fact that it can be one of the most damaging things is an ego. If you let it run wild, it can cause all sorts of headaches and things like that. But it's usually further down the road. You don't initially see it at the outset. The damage is done kind of slowly but surely, and it's very hard to reverse later on. So you started your own firm, and give us starting any kind of a business is very challenging. Can you give us an idea what, say, the 6 months prior to starting your business looked like? Because I'm guessing that there was some prep work and you kind of had this idea before you pushed the button to kind of go. Was there a kind of a trigger moment that kind of brought it all together?
Yeah, well, weirdly, I always wanted to start my own firm. Because I kind of knew that was in my mind. And I've spoken to my wife, Siobhan, who sort of said, I think you've got to do it now. And if you don't do it now, it's going to be very difficult, and I knew there was a sort of time scale. And it's very hard to start a firm with no work if you're an architect, So really, it was about getting my first job. So I was at a barbecue, basically, and there was a lovely couple there, Nat and Lucy, and we were talking about it, and they said they wanted to build an eco house. And I said, well, that's interesting because I'm doing the Eden project at the moment, but I'd quite like to do an eco house. And basically they said, oh, well, why didn't you do it then? And then we had a big sort of chat, and there was a kind of 6 months, will they, won't they sort of thing. And actually the truth is I started my company off the back of that job, basically.
Yeah.
So then that project was on Grand Designs. So we have a telly program in Tate called Grand Designs, which is sort of Kevin McLeod presents.
I know it well. Yeah, I love that program.
Yeah, and so there's but it started actually. It was quite a difficult job because Nat then got stomach cancer actually, and died quite quickly.
Oh wow!
So we'd kind of set the project up to go in one direction, and suddenly there was less money available. So we had to kind of rework the project to make it sort of smaller and essentially slightly more economic. And we also had to help Lucy kind of build it, because it was really Nat's. A lot of it had been pushed through by Nat, and Lucy wasn't sort of in tune with all of it, as it were, as a project. So it had quite a sort of difficult beginnings, really.
Wow.
But then it got built, and it was on Grand Designs, and it was a very nice house. Like, it did work. And sometimes projects, everything just kind of goes right. Just everything kind of went right. It was fine. It was good. It's great, and it was quite a nice project in that. What Nat wanted to do was build a low energy house. At that point, this was 2008, 9. At that point, it seems strange to say this, but a lot of eco houses were a little bit strange. They're a bit kind of quirky, and Nat wanted to have a house that normal people would look at and say, that's a nice house, kind of thing. I'd like that house, and it wasn't too weird, but strategically everything in it worked really well. It fitted well, and it was just a kind of nice eco project that was fabric led and all that kind of thing, fabric first. So it's like well insulated, triple glazed, all these kind of things. And it just worked really well on that front. It was like just a really good prototypical low energy house. And actually now people are much more used to the idea of a low energy house and kind of what that means for an aesthetic and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's the most watched episode of Grand Designs ever, of course, because actually when you played it back within an hour, I mean, it's interesting when things happen to you over a 3-year period in your life and then they happen in an hour, it's very dramatic. So the episode was very dramatic, watching
with the client dying in the middle of it. Wow.
Yeah, it was really, and it's quite tragic actually. And of course so that was, I have to say, a sort of remarkable launch pad for our practice, really. And we then, for about a 5-year period, did a lot of low energy houses for people, which was really great fun, and we really loved it. And what I particularly liked is they weren't all houses for posh people. They were sort of 3-4 bed houses for sort of middle class people who just wanted to kind of change. They wanted to retune their lifestyle. Do you know what I mean? They live somewhere right now, and they wanted to live more in tune with a lower energy consumption, a more sustainable life. And quite often they were getting a little bit further out into the countryside, and that was lovely work. And then after doing that for about 5 years, we sort of got the hang of it, very nice stuff. But we thought we should probably start kind of broadening our net, if you like, as a practice. We thought, well, we should probably start doing some other stuff, along the same lines. And what's quite interesting is, through doing the houses, we learned a lot of stuff. Sort of, we'd learned how to get planning permission in very difficult places, because quite often they're very sensitive sites, or they were historically listed buildings. We'd learned how to actually build something that's very sustainable. So we'd learned how to do triple glazing and super insulation and MVHR and all these technologies that are now much more widespread, but we kind of built them, 23 times now. And so we started doing other projects. So actually now we do, so we're going for another 6 years beyond that now. So we're going for 11 years. And now we do hotels. We do a lot of kind of leisure work for people like the National Trust. We do education work for both private schools and for universities. So we're building at the moment in York, for York St John University. We're building kind of big theatre and creative teaching space and a big sort of timber framed atrium collaborative area. And we're working for Watergate Bay Hotel. We're doing a hotel for the Eden Project. So we still work for the Eden Project quite a lot. We're doing lots of different things and sort of big multiple housing schemes as well. But it all comes from the same place. It all comes from wanting to combine side of nature with sustainable buildings in a kind of simple way. We always try to keep things from getting too complicated, with having a sort of holistic approach to it. So making sure that it's not just about energy and water, it's also about how you want to live. And we always try to make sure that we understand that with people or organisations. And that's really, a lot of our work is kind of very similar, although it crosses lots of sectors, and it comes from our kind of base of those first eco houses, basically.
So, interesting. Yeah. That's great. It's great to make a name for yourself in that sort of sector, because I do think I certainly see it here in the business park. I see it a big shift towards sustainability and sustainable operations, and just generally it's going in that direction. I wanted to ask you, building your business now for 11 years, what of your own habits and behaviors and mindsets would you say has made the greatest impact on the business? Have you had to change any behaviors and over the years, or your mindset since you began?
Yeah. No, I made a mistake at the start, actually, in total truth, because I started and I called it Jerry Tate Architects, and I did that on purpose. And I thought, well, it's only me, right? So, I'm running around doing all this, so that's that. And of course, actually, 5 years in, it wasn't just me. There was, 10 of us, and it was becoming a problem, because if you call yourself Jerry Tate Architects and then you're not at the meeting, whatever that meeting is, people are like, well, where's Jerry?
Yeah.
You can't be at every meeting. It's impossible. And actually, once again, you're back to that thing that Nick had told me, to be fair, before I started, that it is not about you. It's a team game. You have to make it into a team game. So at that point, we reframed it. And I made Rory, who'd started with me at the very start, I made Rory a partner, and we turned it into something that was clearly an organization, not a person, if you see what I mean. And that was actually the biggest change in my mindset about the company, that I'm creating a framework within which people do work rather than I'm doing the work. So one of the best things that happened to me was I read Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, and he makes a point about, he founded Pixar with John Lasseter and with Steve Jobs. And his thing is, well, actually, if you're running a creative company, you're not driving the train, you're actually laying the track, if that makes sense. You have to know that you are laying the track, not driving the train. If you're driving the train, you're probably stood in the wrong place. And I had a similar thing. I've got a mate called Tom Griffiths who founded something called gapyear.com, who he sold to, I think, Amazon or someone like that for a lot of money.
Gapyear.com.
Gapyear.com, which was in the times when gap years are a big thing, and it was the place you went to find out about your gap year. And his point was, you think that when things are difficult, you should be in the engine room shoveling coal with everybody, but then they don't want you to shovel the coal. They expect you to be stood on the bridge looking at where you're going, right? And so that was like the big mindset change for me, was that we're creating an organization here. We're not creating something that's built around me. Do you see what I mean? It's like a massive change in my mindset, and it happened 5 years in, where it's like, aha, right, So now I still, do a lot of sketching, and I still do creative work, and I'm still interested in what's happening, but I don't do all the work, like really the point is to set up a system where people are able to do the best creative work they possibly can. That's actually my job, to make a thing where everyone can do the best work they can. So everything here in like talking back to physical office environments earlier, we were talking about what's important about a physical office environment. Where I am now, we have everything that I think we need to be able to work well. So we've got a big open meeting table, we've got a big screen, we've got a pin-up board, we've got a proper model making area. There's everything that I think an architecture studio requires to let people do the best work they can. And I think that is the point of an architecture office. It's not actually just a place for people to kind of sit at computers, if you see it. It's a thing that enables them to do the best they've ever worked in their life, and it's the same for university environments. It's the same for all creative environments, actually, that the physical manifestation of it is just a prop for people to do the best work they can, whatever that is.
Interesting. My background is I actually started out as an architect myself.
Did you? Okay. Yeah. I did read a little bit of that. Yeah. And you did some property development as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the funny thing is I can relate to your story about being the kid in school who could draw, because that was exactly me. And I was the same. And then I went on a family trip to America, and we spent a couple of days in New York City. And I was just going around looking at the skyscrapers and just being like in awe at these huge things. And I came back with a firm conviction that I wanted to be an architect, and I wanted to do that kind of, thing, huge buildings and stuff.
Brilliant.
So that was what kind of drew me into it. And, but I remember the transition. I took a year out when I worked I took a year out from college just after my dad died. And I decided I'd do a year working for a firm called Scott Talon Walker, and they're a big firm here in Dublin. And that was just great. I thoroughly enjoyed working for them. And there was a guy there called Eugene McLaren who I was working with, and he's like a mentor of mine and just a fantastic guy to work for. But I can remember I used to draw. So I had my rotring pens, and we used to do, the lines, and I was
I
pretty,
love that.
I used to
Yeah,
do all the
yeah,
pen work and the penmanship and stuff. And I really enjoyed that kind of artistic kind of outlet and the creativity of it.
yeah.
And then I went back to college, and I did 2 more years of college before graduating. And then I went straight back to the same firm. And sitting on the desk was a computer and a mouse. And
Oh, yeah.
I was like, okay, here you go, Gavin. And I was like, what's this? And I had to learn how to do AutoCAD from scratch. And so I was working there. And I remember just the sense of enjoyment kind of slipped away from me, that because I really enjoyed that creative penmanship, and suddenly clicking a mouse and stuff, it removed some of the romance in it for me, just that aspect. And that's when I started saying, right, I'm going to have to go out on my own if I want to become more than the kind of the CAD jockey that's sitting there, moused around all day. So
I think actually it's quite interesting that, because in terms of like what are you using to be creative in is really important, and what tools are you operating in?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's one thing there, which is that both in I teach at UCL, and in practice, me and Rory are very clear about, you're not always sat at a computer. Because if you are, there's something wrong. You've got to build a physical model. You've got to do a sketch. You've got to kind of rotate between mediums, because otherwise you're missing something. It's never about sitting. It's never about sitting there working really hard forever kind of thing. You've got to stop and take a step back. And we also do design reviews. We do every Monday. We spend the whole day doing design reviews where we kind of physically pin stuff up. Or recently, actually, we're doing MS Teams, run through PowerPoint. It's not quite the same, but have a look at it and just are we doing the right thing here? Is this right or not? Because if you don't do that, you get sidetracked.
And does everyone participate in the office?
Yeah. Totally open. Yeah. I mean, sometimes people want to do some work and they don't want to participate, but it's not obligatory, But everyone's. I mean, it's back to this thing of everyone has a really good point to make, and quite often, because I'm a bit old and gnarly, I'll miss something. I won't. I've already got too many shortcuts in my head, and I won't think of something kind of slightly off the wall, And then someone who, frankly, has less experience than me will say something which is really interesting because they haven't shortcutted it in their head. So it's not always that experience is useful. Interestingly, sometimes
it's a good mix is what you need, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think I'm a bit sad here. Story about digital production. I think the digital production in architecture has taken a long time to get to a good place. I think it's now starting to get there again. But I think when people first started getting rid of drawing boards and bringing in computers, what you did at the computer was an exact replica of what you did on the drawing board, just less fun. So I used to really like, the rotary stuff. When I started my career, it was just at the end of that, but I was really good at it and I loved it,
Yes.
And then it's just not the same doing that line, but clicking it on a computer is not the same. But now, as you know, we actually, most of our work is done in something called building information modeling, which is a sort of intelligent 3D environment where
it's totally different.
Totally different. Yeah. So you're actually making a little 3D model of the building in the computer, and it's got all the door handles in it and the hinges and things. So it kind of spins into construction information. But you can press a button now and walk around it. It's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's so much more powerful when you think back to the old, AutoCAD Release 4. It's the same company, but with AutoCAD Release 4, there was none of that. So it has sort of, I think it's taken about 20 years really for digital production and architecture to get back to a sort of more joyous place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It does, yeah. So tell me, I wanted to ask you actually about some of the clients that you're working with. I mean, without naming names or anything like that, but I'm sure you've worked with some successful people that, and I'm just wondering, have you seen any sort of common traits amongst the successful guys that kind of stands out as to why they're successful?
Well, some of our clients, I have to say, have a very clear a sort of ethical, or really it's like a standpoint on life and what they're trying to achieve. And I think that's one of the strongest things I've seen in an organization, that means you can then produce good work for them and everyone kind of knows where they're going. So, and that can relate to an individual. It can also relate to like an overall company, although quite often it's an individual who's kind of leading that process, if you like, or driving it, driving through what the vision is. But, if you imagine, because of the kind of practice we are, a lot of people working for, either they are kind of educational or leisure, but a lot of them are about access to nature, or about outdoors, or about sustainability, or that's the same with the kind of cultural sector. Or if we're, in our hotel clients, a lot of them are still about, creating a kind of sustainable approach to it. And when you stay at them, you feel more in touch with nature. And housing, if someone comes to us for housing development, they're probably looking to develop a product which is not a standard Barratt product. Not to be horrible to Barratt, I shouldn't be horrible, because some things they do are actually quite good. But it's a kind of linked landscape, low energy, positive carbon, people are going to live a better lifestyle kind of thing. And all of those clients, without fail, have developed a really clear vision about what they are trying to achieve in the world. And it always has profit as a component, but it only has profit as a component within a kind of broader spectrum of what they're out to achieve.
Yeah, it's a good point. I talk about having a roadmap from the outset of your career and kind of knowing where you want to end up, rather than kind of bouncing along. Just kind of, you need to have a clear vision of what you're about, what your values are, and things like that at the outset. That's interesting.
It makes it much, as someone working for them say, it's once you get their vision, normally you can get it quite quickly. It's actually not simpler, I would say, but what you have to achieve to, where you're trying to get to, because you know where they're trying to get to, and they don't know what they've employed you, because they don't know what a building looks like that meets their vision. So they quite often know what their vision is, but they don't know what the building is that ties in with that vision. And your job is to create the kind of physical manifestation of their vision. And it when you've got it, they know it too. They're like, that's it, right, that's us. Brilliant, Anyway, so yeah. So I'd say that's the clearest thing.
And in terms of, obviously there's a big shift towards sustainability, and I'm seeing it here in our business park. I was wondering, have you noticed any other emerging trends that are standing out as slipping into the day-to-day requests from clients and things like that? Is there anything stands out in your mind?
Well, I think that there's something that goes hand in hand with sustainability, and it sort of ties back with the thing I was talking about earlier, which is health and well-being. So I think that it's a balance, wanting to live a sort of balanced life, wanting to lead a kind of healthier lifestyle. So normally all of the things that we're doing with sustainability, so where we're trying to create something that uses less energy, or is timber framed, has less embodied carbon, is always going hand in hand with linking with nature, creating a better lifestyle, giving you a healthier environment in which to live, all those kind of things. So those two things are sort of meshing together now as a sort of future vision about how we want to live as the human race, really. And I think actually that's quite exciting, because previously that hasn't always been the case. There's been, if I think back through previous eras, there's been a lot of talk of efficiency. There's been a lot of talk of kind of tying in with this kind of new machine age. Previous to that, there was a lot of talk of kind of harking back to a kind of bucolic past, if you like, kind of medieval past, where everything was better and wanted to reinvent the Gothic. But where we are now is we know we have to reinvent ourselves. We have to. Yeah. And that's obvious, right? But what we want to do is reinvent ourselves in a way which is more in tune with how we intuitively know we want to live. And I think that's a really exciting place to be at in history. It's slightly unnerving, because of course we don't know what it is. But I think one of the exciting things that we'd like to think we're doing is working inside that process to help it happen. And I think we're one of the many people who are helping develop a vision for that.
Yeah. That's interesting. And do you find, obviously, given the relationships that you have with your clients and stuff, most of the clients are coming to you because of your reputation. So you don't need to convince people to do, to have a sustainable approach to design and stuff. But in, say, speaking to the audience on this podcast, what would you say are the principal kind of benefits of actually approaching a sustainable approach to your design, or if you're building something, why should you employ kind of sustainable methods and stuff?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's a really good point. And what I would also say is that, even we have a spectrum, right? So although we look, if you look at our website, we clearly give you a certain kind of thing. Within our range of clients, we have, some people want a passive house, which is very, very, very low energy, sustainable building, right through to people who want it to be little bit better than the building regs, and so it's our job to always steer them as much as we can towards the most sustainable solution. But your job is to present them with the solutions. It's not to make the decisions for them, if that makes sense. So if they want to make certain decisions, you can't stop them making that decision unless you're prepared to walk away from the job, which pretty much all architects aren't, right? Most architects want to see a job through. You have to be comfortable with showing them what they should do and then going with their decisions. So that's one way of framing sustainability. But, in terms of then, what are the advantages of it? Well, there's there are kind of three things, right? So thing number one is like direct monetary payback, which is always difficult because that's a shifting landscape. But in the UK, there are right now clear payback periods based on things like tariffs or based on saving energy. So if you put photovoltaic panels on your roof, the payback is about 8 to 10 years. If you build a passive house building, the energy savings you make are 15 to 20 years. I think there should be grants to make that better, but there you go. So if someone says to you, are there monetary payback periods, you can say yes, and you can show what they are, and they can make decisions based on that. That's not a very kind of holistic way of making a decision, but it is a clear way of presenting them. Thing number two is like an improved outcome, if you like. So there isn't enough data on this at the moment, but there are things like there is data on, say, education, that you can get 16% better educational outcomes in an environment which is better connected to nature. So if you have an environment with good ventilation, good natural daylight, natural materials, and some access to a planted outdoor space, you get 16% better educational outcomes. So that's something else, which is like a clear one-off boom. If you do this, you get this sort of thing.
Interesting.
The third thing is slightly more complicated to demonstrate, and that is a discussion with your client about the broader benefits of what they're doing and a sort of more long-term view to the uptick of what they're going to do. So say we're working a lot with someone with Keyland, who are Yorkshire Water up in Eschol, and we've been developing with them a kind of 6 capitals model, where one of those capitals is economic, but there's lots of other capitals. There's social capital, there's natural capital, there's economic capital. There's sort of these 6 spheres which they look at overlapping. And the reason they do that is because their ownership always extends massively beyond the bit you're actually doing for them. So we're doing 150 houses for them and 1 million square feet of commercial. So that's the actual job. But of course, they also own 10 times as much land around that. So through the capitals, we can demonstrate essentially an improvement in all of those capitals if they do the right thing on those particular sites. So in the long term, because they're going to keep hold of that land, that's important for them. So it's a sort of, it's not such an easy sell, if you see what I mean, because you have to kind of do the work on it, and you have to then talk to them about the concepts of the capitals and demonstrate that, improving all of those capitals for them in the long term is a big benefit, and explain why. So it's not quite as easy as like, if you do this, you save this much money, or if you do this, you get a better educational outcome.
Yeah. Well, I think human nature is to kind of just get the fastest payback. And so often you're pushing against that, and you're trying to say, no, there's a longer term beneficial way to do this. And but we have to kind of condition ourselves to accepting that, there's a bit of sacrifice in sometimes, and you don't get paid immediately up front. Sort of the better outcome is often the slower payback over a number of years than wanting it all up front,
But it's hard to, I think the other thing I would say is, and I know people always say this, is the earlier you think about what your approach to sustainability is, essentially integrating it into your project, the less it costs.
Yeah. For sure.
So if you think about it at the end, and you're tied into inefficient building, and you want to make it sustainable, it's very difficult. It's going to cost you money to do it, basically, whereas the earlier you think about it, the more integrated it is, the less it costs. One of the difficulties I've always thought about this is actually quite often sustainable buildings are just kind of slightly better buildings. You know what I mean? Like if buildings by us, they tend to have, good even daylight spread. They tend to have good mixed mode ventilation strategies. They tend to be slightly nicer places to be. They tend to be timber frames, so you've got this nice natural materials. That's just a better building, really. Yeah. So quite often then you're comparing it to a building which wouldn't be so nice, and you're saying, well, this sustainability lark, that's adding 10% to the costs here. It's like, well, yeah, but like if you wanted to just do a better building, that would be 10% more expensive anyway. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Why not make a better building that's sustainable as well, kind of thing? And anyway, there you go.
Thanks. I'm going to ask just 3 final questions, if that's okay, Jerry. The first one I was going to ask is the best advice you ever got, or the advice that you would give your 20-year-old self if you were talking to him today.
Okay, well, I'll stick to sort of business, right? Because that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about practices and things like that, starting a practice. So there's a bloke called Jeff Kipnis at Harvard who was like a very clever critic, and he was a good guy, right? And he used to get us all around the table and talk to us about how life works, kind of thing. He didn't need to, but he was just quite generous. And he really nailed it because he said, look, I'm all of you lot, because it was an international course, right? It was a bit like Top Gun for architects, not the tosser about thing, but it's like everyone internationally coming there. He said, I know what you lot are all going to do. You lot all want to go and start your own practices when you get back to Madrid or London or wherever you're from. And you're all worried right now about exactly what kind of practice you're going to have. What kind of architect am I, kind of thing. It's like, the best advice I can give you is you are who you are, and the practice will be a function of that. So whatever you are right now, that's it, so you don't need to get all anxious about exactly who you are and exactly what you are. And he was right, because, I kind of like come from this place where I've done the Eden Project, and I enjoy nature and I enjoy sustainability, but I want to be social and be active. Basically, it was already written in the stars what kind of practice we would get out of this, me and Rory. And I didn't have to worry about it. But actually, I spent ages of time gnashing my teeth. What kind of practice are we going to be? And it is what it is. So I wish I'd give myself that advice and not worry about that, and actually do something slightly more useful.
Yeah. Tell me, are there any books, podcasts, or resources that you'd strongly recommend our audience check out?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that I'm quite interested in things like E.F. Schumacher, Small is Beautiful. Those kind of books. I think that's a really good one to read, which was like he was the president of the Soil Association, and he was the first one to talk about a kind of integrated approach to sustainability, which is more about getting in touch with nature. So I think that that's a really good book for people to read if you just want to kind of get it really quickly. I think that's great. The other book, I have to say, and I've already mentioned it, is Ed Catmull's Creativity Inc., which I think is it's just a history of Pixar, but I think it's a really good book about how to set up a healthy design company which has a kind of strong grassroots creative base, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does make sense, yeah.
Oh, and your podcast is called Gavin as well, which actually I have been listening
My
to.
My podcast is great.
Well, no, I love it. I'll tell you what I like about your podcast is there's a lot of property podcasts which I like. Do it. I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but there's a lot of property developer podcasts which are like, kind of pumping you up to like, do it, just do it now. Don't think, do it, kind of thing. And your property podcast is like, well, but just, work out what you're doing. There's no rush. The wheel's not going to run out of stuff. You just need to get it right, kind of thing.
Carefully, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a much more. It appeals to me much more. So there you go.
Oh, thank you. And then finally, making a positive impact on the world. I'm guessing that's important to you, given the conversation that we've had so far. I'm just wondering, if you were to fast forward, say 20, 25 years, and you're looking back on your life and career, what do you hope to have achieved in your life in that regard?
Yeah, well, I think apart from having, I've got 3 boys who are nice people. I think that would be what I'd mainly like to achieve. But outside of that, yeah, 3 little boys, and if they don't become nice people, I feel really bad. But outside of that, I think as a practice, I know, because we've talked about this, we would really like to have some built examples of you know, buildings that demonstrate what we think the right answer is. You know, buildings that are creating communities that are linked to the natural world and that tread lightly on the earth. They kind of got very low energy and water consumption, and that didn't cost a fortune to build. You know, and if we could have just like 5 of those, when people say, well, how are we going to do this? You say, well, we've done some work. Here it is. You know, maybe that's part of the answer. If we could do that, I'd feel totally happy. That'd be great. You know, again, it's this thing, creating the right kind of buildings for the future. It's not just us doing it. There's lots of other companies doing really great examples. But I think if we can help answer some of those questions through what we're doing, I'd feel dead chuffed at the end, basically. That'd be it.
Great answer. Jerry, thanks very much. I just thought if somebody wants to connect with you socially or online, or where's the best place to find you?
I'll tell you what, come to our website, tateharmer.com. So that's www.tateharmer.com. All of our contact information is there. You can email me. If you go to studio, those come through to me, but also our Twitter handles there, everything. So I think that's probably the best thing, is just go to our website, tateharmer.com. Yeah, do get in touch. We love to hear from people. It's really nice. So yeah, great. Brilliant.
All right, Jerry. Well, look, thanks so much for being on the podcast, and wishing you the best of luck, and hope to speak to you soon.
Well, thank you, Gavin, for having us. I've really, really enjoyed it. And it's lovely to get to chat to you more. Yeah, I must say, I really enjoy your take on property and everything. So yeah, great stuff. Fantastic. All right. Thanks, Gavin.
So I really hope you enjoyed that episode with Jerry Tate. I was a little nervous about changing the format, so I'd really appreciate your thoughts if you could let me know how you found the interview and any suggestions or opinions on it, and ways I might be able to improve the podcast. I have put various links to the different resources and info that Jerry mentions on in the show notes. And that's it, guys. Thank you for listening to episode 14. If you enjoyed this, please share it out with someone you feel who might enjoy it or benefit from it. If you have any questions or topics you would like covered in future episodes, please leave a comment in the Facebook group, that is Behind the Facade Community, or my YouTube page, where I now have the podcast going out weekly as well. That is Behind the Facade on YouTube. And currently the Facebook group is at 182 members, and we're always happy to have more members on board. The more the merrier. So please look it up there, Behind the Facade Community. And as always, you can reach out to me directly via social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and you'll find me using the handle Gavin J Gallagher. And don't forget, I have a YouTube channel called PropTech TV too. So that's it, guys. Until next week, take care of yourself.